Module 1, Introduction to Social Cognition. In this series of modules, we're going to talk about the definition of theory of mind, how it develops, explanations of how it develops, its importance and practical implications of theory of mind, and a review of what we've learned as well as research gaps that still pertain in this area. Often when we study cognitive development, we're interested in how children engage in problem solving and how this changes with age. But in an area of study called social cognition, we're interested in people solving, that is, how children come to think about the social world and relationships. This has implications for friendships, peer acceptance and aggression, including relational aggression, such as verbal bullying. There are some basic cognitive skills needed to do this sort of people solving, what we refer to as theory of mind. There are several characteristics of what we would call socially competent children. They approach and trust others, they're interested in others' feelings and well-being, they have good emotion regulation, they know how to enter groups or games smoothly, they're perceptive and able to monitor others' feelings and intentions. They value social relationships over saving face, so they know when to apologize, for example. And they have an ability to manage disagreements or conflicts with others. Where does social competence come from? Well, most of the research is correlational, so it's difficult to disentangle cause and effect. But we do know several factors play a role, including the child's temperament or personality, the family environment, such as having parents who help the child enter social situations, are sensitive and responsive to their child's needs, and model socially competent behavior themselves. Another important factor is the child's cognitive development, having what's called a theory of mind and using it accurately and appropriately. To illustrate what we mean by theory of mind, consider this scene from To Kill a Mockingbird. Scout has just returned home from school after being punished for getting into a fight on the playground. Her father, Atticus, says, "If you just learn a single trick, Scout, you'd get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view." And she says, "What's that?" And he says, "Till you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it." Consider also one of the main messages in How to Win Friends and Influence People. Published in 1937, this book was an overnight success and bestseller, eventually selling over 15 million copies. Dale Carnegie was a very well-known motivational lecturer, and one of the secrets of influencing people is summed up well by Henry Ford's quote, "If there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as your own." And that's really what we mean by theory of mind. As noted by Jean Piaget, young children have a hard time understanding how thoughts, beliefs, and ideas can be different from the things they refer to. For example, thinking that if you step on a crack, you really will break your mother's back. Therefore, it is difficult for them to take the perspective of another person, and as a result, their thinking is egocentric. As illustrated in the previous example from To Kill a Mockingbird, we often need to be reminded to take the perspective of others. Even as adults, when we have learned to see things from someone else's perspective, we often forget to do it. This is an especially tricky skill for young children to learn and practice. Theory of mind then refers to the understanding that people think and have mental representations of things and events in the world which are often different from our own, and that we can explain and predict people's actions by way of underlying mental representations, including their internal states, and the understanding that internal states lead to behaviors, and that these are representations of reality, which can be false. Theory of mind is extremely important for everyday communication and social relationships. In adults, it might be strongly evident in a job interview situation, whereas it sometimes suffers from lack of use in our close relationships. And that's what gets us into trouble, failing to recognize the other person's beliefs, desires, and intentions. Therefore, it is important to understand when and how theory of mind develops in childhood. Module 2, Development of Theory of Mind. What do we know about the development of theory of mind in children. Most research on theory of mind is done with children between the ages of 3 and 5 because of the natural developmental advances in that age range. Much of this research uses puppets and asks children what others will think about a given situation. In a true belief task, the examiner might say, "What is in this box?" And then, after children look inside, they might say, "What will Ernie, who has not seen inside this box, say is in it?" But a true belief task is inadequate because true beliefs can simply be read off of reality. They don't necessarily tell us anything about the person's understanding of mental states. So for example, if we show the child that there really are crayons inside this crayon box, and then ask him or her, "What does Ernie think is inside this box?" and they answer crayons, we can't really tell for sure if children are able to think about Ernie's mind or simply reading off of reality and their own knowledge. So we need to create a false belief situation to test this more accurately. Now, what if we show the child that there are really sticks inside this crayon box? And then we were to ask the child, when you first saw it, before it was opened, what did you think or say was in it? And similarly, we could say, what will Ernie think is inside? And a 3-year-old child might erroneously answer, sticks. So false belief tasks are better because to understand that someone could have a false belief about something in the world, you must make reference to that person's mind, and you can't simply read off of reality or your own knowledge or belief. Therefore, false belief tasks have been used extensively in research on theory of mind in children. In these videos, we first show a contents false belief like the crayon box with the sticks inside that we saw previously. And in the first video, a 3-year-old child fails the task, reporting that she herself or a puppet would think that the contents are what the contents really are, whereas a 5-year-old in the second video passes the task and seems to understand that someone else would hold a false belief about the contents of the container.
Look what I have here. What do you think is inside this box?
Band-Aids.
It's a Band-Aid box, isn't it? Go ahead, look inside. Hey, those are crayons. What are crayons doing inside the Band-Aid box?
I don't know. Who took all the Band-Aids?
Maybe. So when you first saw this box before you opened it up, did you think there were Band-Aids inside or did you think there were crayons inside?
Crayons.
Okay. And here's Bert. Bert's never looked inside this box before. Does he think there are Band-Aids inside or does he think there are crayons inside?
Crayons.
Crayons? Okay, good job. Let's show him.
Okay, Rebecca, we have a little game to play with this. Rebecca, what do you think's in here?
Crayons.
You think it's crayons? Because it is a crayon box, isn't it? That's a very good guess. Let's see what's actually inside here.
I know it's in there.
What? What are those?
Graham crackers.
Graham crackers, that's right. Not crayons at all, is it? Let's put them back in the box. You want to help me? Thank you. Now, can I ask you a question, Rebecca?
Sure.
When you first saw this box, when you first looked at the box, what did you think was inside?
Crayons.
You thought it was crayons. Well, that's not surprising, is it? Because it's a crayon box.
Right.
Now you know what's really and truly inside. What is inside?
Graham crackers.
Crackers, that's right. Let me ask you one more question. If your mommy walked in the room right now and she saw this box, what would she think is inside the box?
Crayons.
She would think crayons.
Another commonly used false belief task presents a scenario in which a toy is moved from one location to another, unbeknownst to one of the characters. So here we have Sally, and Sally has a basket. Anne has a box. Sally has a marble, puts it in the basket. Sally leaves the scene. Anne takes the marble and moves it to the box. And now Sally comes back and children are told that she wants to play with her marble, and then they're asked, where will Sally look for her marble? The correct answer is the basket, because that is where she last saw it. But many children incorrectly say she'll look for it in the box, where it really is now. These data show that there is a shift in children's performance on theory of mind research tasks between the ages of 3 and 5. As children get older, they're better able to think about what is in someone else's mind. Thus, it is important to realize that 3-year-olds are just beginning to learn this. Sometimes adults think that children should be able to think about others at an early age, but really this ability develops over time. These developmental data are shown clearly in a meta-analysis combining 52 separate studies, showing that the age effect is highly robust. Across these 52 studies, investigators were able to make several conclusions about what does and does not seem to affect children's performance on false belief tasks. Their performance does not seem to be impacted by sex, type of task, whether it's a contents false belief task or the location false belief task. It doesn't matter if you ask them where will somebody look, what will somebody say, what does somebody know or think. And it doesn't matter if the investigators use puppets or a videotaped person or drawings. And it also doesn't matter what the nature of the target object is, whether it's a ball, a toy car, or something more appealing like chocolate. And finally, it doesn't matter whether children are asked to report on their own false belief or somebody else's false belief. On the other hand, children's performance on false belief tasks does seem to be impacted by whether there's a motive to play a trick on somebody or not, and younger children perform better on tasks if there's a trick involved. They also do better if they are active participants in the task, such as moving the location of the marble from one location to the other by themselves. It also matters whether the target item is present or absent during the questioning, so children do better if the target item is not present during the questioning, because then the pull of reality is not quite so strong for them. And lastly, there are some cultural differences. False belief performance develops at slightly different rates depending on country of origin, but nevertheless, children in all countries where it's been tested have shown the same general developmental pattern between ages 3 and 5. This developmental pattern cross-culturally is shown in this slide. Beyond the preschool period, there are also later developments in theory of mind. These are measured by tasks such as the second-order false belief task, where children have to think about two individuals, where one individual might have a false belief about the second individual's beliefs. These are passed by age 7 or 8. Strange stories, where children have to explain why a character in a story acted a certain way, such as why did they say something untruthful? Well, maybe to be sarcastic. And the mind in the eyes task, where children are shown pictures like this one and asked which word best describes this individual. For example, hate, unkind, worried, or bored. And the correct answer for this example is worried. It's unclear, however, if these are new conceptual advances in theory of mind or just more complex tasks that tend to be passed later. Conversely, before the preschool period, there are foundations for theory of mind that are gradually being built up. Infant social awareness is a very important beginning. Infants are very socially attuned and interested in other people and love to observe other people's actions. In the first 18 to 24 months, they can't use language to show us what they know about other people, so we have to rely on other methods. By 6 months, children view simple actions of other people as being goal-directed. And by 9 to 12 months, they can share in the psychological experience of others. So they understand visual experiences. For example, they recognize that an adult looking at a toy with her eyes open is having a perceptual experience and will later be familiar with that toy, but an adult looking at a toy with her eyes closed is not. They can also engage in joint attention with others and imitate others. They can catch another's emotional disposition toward objects, such as to be fearful of them or to approach them. And they can differentiate between accidental and intentional actions of others. By 13 to 18 months, there appears to be some awareness of false belief, as shown in looking time tasks. So even though we showed earlier that 3-year-olds really struggle with false belief tasks, and it's not until about 4 or 5 that children pass them, we can use looking time tasks to show that children much younger than that do show some surprise, at least, when somebody acts on the basis of a true belief, whereas they should be acting on the basis of a false belief. So infants look longer at surprising events, and they seem to expect an actor with a false belief to go to the wrong location to find an object. By 18 to 24 months, they understand the self as an independent body and begin to engage in mirror self-recognition, for example. They imitate the action intentions of others rather than the actions themselves. And at 2 years, they are beginning to have an explicit third-person perspective. They know the difference between thoughts in the mind and things in the world, such as in pretend play. They have a basic understanding of the link between emotions and desires. For example, a person will be sad if a desire is unfulfilled. They can differentiate between what I feel and what you feel. They engage in pro-social behavior toward others. And they know the difference between what I want and what you want. So even before children can pass a false belief task, they understand quite a lot about the social world and what's going on in other people's minds and their feeling states. To summarize, by the end of the first 2 years of life, infants are adept at understanding basic goals, intentions, perceptions, and emotional expressions, as well as simple preferences and dispositions of others. They move from shared psychological states to an appreciation of differences between individuals in their psychological or feeling states. These abilities are likely the building blocks for more mature aspects of social cognition, as seen in false belief tasks, where performance improves from 3 to 5 years. There's a new wave of research suggesting nascent reasoning about false belief is operational by 13 to 18 months of age, although it's not yet a representational theory of mind seen in older children. Module 3, Explanations for Development. How does theory of mind develop? Well, we know roughly when theory of mind develops. So psychologists are now interested in how. The changes in theory of mind appear to be both conceptual and neuropsychological. One prominent idea is, awkwardly enough, called the theory theory. This theory proposes that children's ideas about the mind become more sophisticated over time through trial and error, much like a scientist's ideas about his or her subject matter become more developed through experimentation. Certainly there is something conceptual going on from age 3 to 5 that enables children to understand mental states and the idea that our minds are not simply copies of the world around us. Instead, they are representational devices that sometimes distort the world and get things wrong. In the little scientist analogy, the idea is, I have a theory about how to predict other people's behavior. And it might start off with something like, they think like I do. But sometimes people act in a strange way and not thinking like they do. And this eventually causes children to question their theory and revise it. Through constant hypothesis testing, they develop more and more adult-like theory of mind. In other words, at age 5, they have a new concept, a theory or framework that just wasn't there at age 3, according to the theory theory. Theory theorists would say that children treat the mind as a distinct subject area, and that they organize their knowledge about minds into a coherent theory containing concepts and causal processes, at least some of which are unobservable constructs such as knowledge. We have several lines of evidence to support this idea. For example, there is a stage-like progression in the kinds of mental states that children understand, from the simplest to the most difficult. At around 18 months, children understand others' intentions and goals. At 2 to 3 years, they understand other people's preferences. And, for example, they understand someone else can prefer broccoli for a snack, whereas they themselves prefer cookies. At 4 to 5 years, they understand beliefs, especially false beliefs, as we've shown. And at 5 to 6 years, they begin to understand emotions, particularly discrepant emotions, the idea that two different people can feel differently about the same situation. This is similar to other stage theories in that development, rather than being continuous, is more discontinuous, kind of like the development of a butterfly, going through different changes in developmental stages. I'll briefly mention 3 other theories about how theory of mind develops. In modularity, the idea is that there are innate modules that gradually come online to perform computations about the mind. That there is an innate biological blueprint for humans to develop 3 concepts: a theory of the body, that agents can move on their own; theory of mind 1, which is maybe akin to what we see in infants in the work I described earlier. This is the understanding that people perceive the environment and pursue their goals. And then lastly, theory of mind 2 comes online, where children begin to understand propositional attitudes, mental states such as pretending, believing, imagining, and desiring. And now they can understand he thinks that, X, Y, Z. In simulation theory, the idea is that children rely on personal experience to simulate processes in the minds of other people. So, for example, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and walking around for a while, as Atticus said in To Kill a Mockingbird. This way you get a first-hand view of what their feelings and what their life must be like. Development, then, is the ability to make increasingly accurate simulations of this kind, and it gets exercised through pretend play and imagination. A third idea about how theory of mind develops involves language. We do see that higher verbal ability is consistently associated with better or earlier theory of mind. A specific aspect of grammatical development, understanding sentence complements, such as Ernie thinks that the ball is in the basket, appears to be particularly important for understanding false beliefs. And language also plays a role in having a more explicit theory of mind. But there are foundations before infants begin to speak, which has led some people to question how crucial it is to have language in order to understand other people's internal states. At the same time, there are important changes in brain functioning that allow for the development of theory of mind. Early childhood is a remarkable period of brain plasticity, especially in the prefrontal cortex. Recall that theory of mind refers to understanding of the mind as holding representations of events in the world, which are sometimes mistaken, and that different people can have different ideas about the same thing. It's possible that flexible control over multiple perspectives, coordinated with one's own highly salient perspective or egocentric perspective, may be a necessary ingredient for theory of mind to get off the ground. The aspect of brain development and neuropsychological development that seems to be most important for theory of mind development is executive function. This is a meta-construct or umbrella term for the processes that are involved in top-down control of thought, action, and emotion. It includes processes such as working memory, the ability to control impulses, and switch tasks flexibly. Executive function is seen in children's ability to pay attention, follow rules, plan actions, and delay gratification. Self-control is the common colloquial term for executive function. An impressive body of research has shown that the time course of executive function development is long. It's still developing into one's mid-20s. However, there are striking improvements in the preschool years. In several developmental disorders, such as ADHD, conduct disorder, and autism, executive function is impaired. And its healthy development seems to depend upon brain, cognitive, and social processes, which work in concert. For example, our research has shown dramatic changes with age in working memory, such as the ability to hold in mind a series of digits and repeat them in a backward or reverse order. There are marked improvements between ages 3 and 5 years in this ability. Data from several executive function measures are consistent with this general developmental progression. As illustrated here, performance on a commonly used measure of cognitive flexibility, called the dimensional change card sort, improved dramatically from 2.5 to 5 years of age. If we put this developmental picture of executive function together with that of theory of mind, we can see that they both improve a lot in the preschool years. But this just shows that they are both strongly related to age. How do we know if they are truly related? There are several lines of evidence for a relation between executive function and theory of mind. Correlational evidence suggests that individuals who are good at executive function tasks are also good at theory of mind tasks, independent of age or intelligence. Longitudinal evidence has shown that early executive function skills predict later theory of mind skills. And lastly, experimental evidence suggests that younger children tend to succeed on false belief tasks when we reduce the executive function demands. So there seems to be something inherent in some of the theory of mind tasks themselves that requires good executive functioning skills. Together, this evidence suggests that children must have some control over the self, over their own thoughts and actions, before they can fully appreciate someone else's point of view. To summarize what we know about how theory of mind develops, the development of self-control appears to be integral to social cognition. There's a robust relation between individual differences in executive function and theory of mind in preschoolers, both concurrently and over time. Experimental manipulations of theory of mind tasks support this hypothesis. But conceptual change, language, and experience also contribute to theory of mind development. Executive function and theory of mind most likely work in concert to promote social competence. New research seeks to identify these underlying processes. Module 4, Importance and Practical Implications of Theory of Mind. The research on theory of mind has theoretical importance on the one hand. So children's thinking about others appears to follow a similar course as and rely upon their development of thought in general. So the stage-like progression in the development of theory of mind is similar to Piaget and the new core knowledge theories, where there is stage-like theory building, perhaps around an innate starting state. It's also reminiscent of Vygotsky's theory about sociocultural influences. Such influences on theory of mind include having siblings to have to negotiate with and engage in conflict with, so it would be beneficial to think about your siblings' internal states and state of mind. Having families who talk about mental states would also seem to make a difference. And having a well-developed self through imitation of others, self-recognition, and understanding of the self in time, having an autobiographical sense of self. Also, with respect to theoretical importance, it's interesting that theory of mind is not present, or at least not nearly to the same degree, in non-human primates as it is in children. Theory of mind also has practical importance. There appear to be real consequences to developing a theory of mind early versus late. Children who have advanced theory of mind in preschool later show advanced understanding of emotions and empathy for others, improved peer relations such as better conflict resolution with friends, greater social competence, better academic success over and above IQ. And despite these positive findings later on, it's important to keep in mind that these correlations are not always found, and having a theory of mind is not the same as using it or using it nicely. For example, bullies have been found to have good theory of mind skills too. This leads to the question of whether theory of mind can be taught. Theory of mind is more like language than literacy. It appears to be a system with biological roots that develops without much explicit teaching. But it can be enhanced by opportunities to act on objects, observe others, engage in pretend play, talk about unseen motives for people's actions in real life, as well as in media and books. Factors that appear to promote theory of mind development include talking about internal mental states, such as other people's thoughts, wants, and feelings with your child. Theory of mind in the first 2 years is supported by consistent joint activities, such as playing reciprocal games with sensitive caregivers. Fostering executive function early appears to play a role in improved theory of mind later. Explaining why when disciplining children also is helpful for fostering theory of mind. Sibling conflict, as I mentioned earlier, appears to be something that actually helps promote theory of mind, because in order to resolve such conflicts, you have to begin to understand what the other person is thinking or wanting or feeling. Pretend play also helps to foster theory of mind development, as well as storytelling and reminiscing together about things in the past. This helps to promote an autobiographical sense of self and help the child, for example, remember that when I was 3, I viewed the world in a different way. That helps promote understanding of things like false belief. Module 5, Review and Research Gaps. Research on social cognition is fundamental to understanding the way infants, children, and ultimately adults operate in the social world. Theory of mind is the understanding that people have thoughts and beliefs that might differ from your own and might be mistaken. There are significant changes in false belief understanding between 3 and 5 years of age. There are both earlier foundations and later developments in theory of mind as well. During the first 2 years, children seem to move from coordinating their own interests with others to appreciating the differences between self and other. Later in development, theory of mind becomes more nuanced and subtle, and children begin to engage in mind reading, such as understanding the cues to what someone else might be thinking or feeling just by looking at their facial expressions, for example. Theory of mind is crucial for social competence and school success. Consider what it's like for a child to be in a classroom having to figure out what the teacher's agenda is, what the teacher is hoping for the child to learn or master. Children with better theory of mind tend to do better in school, in part because they have a better understanding of what the teacher's goals are. Both child factors and family factors influence theory of mind development. Child factors include neuropsychological changes, especially executive function or self-control. And family factors include talking with your child from a young age about other people's thoughts and feelings. And lastly, an absence of theory of mind is detrimental, and this is most poignant in the case of autism. Despite having a wealth of knowledge about theory of mind and its development, several gaps remain in our understanding. For example, we need more research on the child and environment factors that affect the rate of development of theory of mind. We also need more longitudinal studies. For example, does social understanding in infancy predict later theory of mind? We need more diverse participants in research studies for them to be more broadly representative. With respect to cultural differences, are early social cognitive abilities universal or culturally specific? To the extent that we do see variability in social cognition across cultures, when and how do these differences arise? We also need more research on the intersection of theory of mind with executive function and moral development, such as putting your theory of mind to good use. And lastly, we need more research on the neural processes underlying theory of mind development and its impairment.